100% of Isabel's students achieve at least one of their top 3 schools, and 95% achieve all 3. Isabel has firsthand on how difficult the admissions process can be and how confusing it can be as well. Students lack a structured 360 approach to learning, while busy parents don't have the time, tools to support them efficiently. That's why she created the company that she created. Provide a clear learning pathway to the exam, one that fits into family life with ease, is fun for children to use, and gets the results that they deserve. Isabel is a member of British Mensa. Wow. So are my kids. Wow. And studied French and philosophy at university, including a year studying metaphysics, wow, at the Sorbonne, Paris, before being called to the Bar of England as a barrister. So you are a barrister first, and it just goes to show that you don't always end up doing what you've actually trained to be doing. So without further ado, Isabel, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Elaine. And I just want to say that I am so grateful to you for having me here, and I'm such an admirer of you and your work, and I know that you, like me, really put the student at the center of everything that you do, the child. And so I work for families, and of course I work for parents, but everything that you do, and it's the same as in what we do at Paideia, is primarily about the student and getting them across the line into the best school for them. And for me, that has often had a lean towards the more academic schools, so academically selective schools. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is the academic selection process for schools that have academic criteria, in particular high academic criteria. Something that, and this is you were speaking to, is there's of course bursary and scholarship options, but we do also support students who are preparing for highly competitive grammar schools. So we support for the full spectrum of 11 plus, and we also support for some of the other entry points as well, although today is going to be primarily focused on the 11 plus entry point for children. So I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. I have a document. As I said, or as Elaine said, sorry, if anyone has any questions, if it's about a specific school, a specific exam, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, wherever questions are to be submitted, and I will answer everything. You will also have the opportunity to book a complimentary session with me, a 30-minute session where we can talk about your specific situation and your child's needs. So if you have lots of questions or you feel like it wasn't answered properly, you'll see a QR code on the screen, and you can go ahead and book a call straight away with me there, and we can chat one-on-one. So, okay. Up on the screen, you've got a little bit about me, which you know already. So I'm going to go straight on and just talk through the assumptions that are up on the bottom left-hand side. So one thing I want to say is that the whole system, and I'm going to be speaking primarily about the independent day and boarding schools in England, but this does also apply to some of the schools in Scotland and even some of the schools in Northern Ireland and Wales, but it's primarily England-based. And I will be speaking about the independent system as a main focus, but a lot of what I say today in terms of the exams does also apply to competitive entry grammar schools. So if a grammar school is something you're looking at, or maybe you're looking at a combination, much of what I will say today will apply to that entry as well. Something to bear in mind is that there are, as you will probably know, there are many different schools, many different characteristics and preferences. And so there are a variety of exam types, requirements, wide ranges of expectations in terms of the results. And so the watermark for one school will often, of course, be very different from another school. But some schools, especially boarding schools, will often put a really big focus on character fit. And so that's often comes through in headmaster or headmistress's reference, comes through an interview, and I'll come to all of that as I go through this talk. And I just want to say that I could probably give you an exception to pretty much everything I say today. And so I've tried to reconcile as much as I can. But as I said, if you want to book a call with me, I can give you specific information and answers to your situation and your child's situation. Okay, so up on the right here, we have the general trajectory for routes through the independent system. The first way you want to categorize is according to gender. So schools will either be girls' schools, boys' schools, or they will be mixed. Some of them will be mixed all the way through. Some of them will be mixed only at certain points. An example being Westminster School, which is mixed at sixth form and is actually now reducing that down, the age bracket in which they'll admit girls. Other schools, for example, Wellington College, are completely mixed. Prep schools, again, some will be mixed and some won't. I'll start off with the girls first. Generally, you will head into, your daughter will head into pre-prep for 4+, and then her main entry point to senior school will be at the 11+. Often girls will leave at the end of year 6, so immediately after they've sat the 11+, and then they'll join their senior school for year 7. But it may also be possible that they are admitted to senior school later, in particular if they're applying to boarding schools where they could go at 13, 14, or even 16. Something to note about the process for the girls is that the overall experience, in my opinion, is quicker, it's more defined, has a tendency to be quite acute, particularly in London. And so what I mean by that is that whereas the boys often have second chance, third chance, you can come back next year, let's see how you've matured, the girls, especially going for the London day schools, it can be really quite cutthroat, and the results that you get in a very small number of exams can define quite markedly the schools that you end up in, your daughter ends up in. Another thing to note is that mixed schools, again, as a general rule, will often adopt the girls' timeline of both girls and boys going in at 11. So thinking about schools like Elaine's in South London, Highgate in North London, these are all schools that are Emmanuel, Southwest, they're mixed, and the children start, both boys and girls, in year 7 at the same time. So coming to the boys is just a general overview of their route. Again, pre-prep from 4+, and if they're in a prep school, particularly a traditional boys prep school, they will be there until the end of year 8. So that means that they'll only start senior school at the age of 13, turning 14, at the beginning of year 9. And oftentimes they will have to sit an additional exam above and beyond what they did at the 11+, which is sometimes the common entrance, and sometimes it's a completely separate exam. So for example, Winchester has its own particular exam that the boys have to sit in year 8, usually to confirm their place at Winchester that September for the following academic year. Some prep schools, some boys preps do end in year 6, but they tend to be mixed. So thinking Faulkner House, for example, it's a prep school. It was originally just girls, and then it started to admit boys. And boys from state schools will generally be admitted into their senior school in year 7, even if other boys are admitted later at year 9. So thinking about places like St. Paul's, Westminster School, City of London, the schools prefer to take the boys rather in earlier, because either they'll end up with no school, or if they're coming from the state system, they like them to be become acclimatized to being in an independent school environment. But every child, no matter what, if they are applying for an academic school, will sit some form of 11 plus exam, including boys, even if they have to go on and sit an exam later on before they join senior school in year 9. So that's a kind of general overview of the routes through the system. I'm just going to clear this. Okay, so the next way that I like to break this down is according to types of exam. So, and this is changing, by the way, it changes year on year. A lot of the work that we do at Paideia is about consolidating those changes. And where there is a new exam type, it's getting information about that exam as soon as possible, feeding that into the curriculum that we're teaching our children, and making sure that no child has missed any topic or question type that they might be asked on that exam. Something about the way that we prepare, and whether it's us or anyone else, I strongly encourage this for any exam that you're preparing for, is that you have to focus on fundamental skills. So that's your basic arithmetic, literacy, spelling, grammar, syntax, etc. And that comes with the small everyday tasks that you and your child do. Reading, just a sheet of maths. It's much better for any of these exams to have small regular work, because you can then use those basic skills to adapt to the specific format of the exam. So coming to the exam specifically, you want to think about an assessment as being one of 3 things. Could be a computerized pretest, could be a written exam, and it could be an interview. Will almost certainly be a combination of all 3 of those things. And as it says here, almost all schools will require an interview. And some of those interviews are academic and some of them aren't. And what that means is that, if you go into St. Paul's, for example, for an interview during the 11 plus, you will be asked on the spot maths questions. On the spot, you'll be asked to read a poem, analyze the poem that you've never seen before, discuss it, identify poetic devices. This, using your academic knowledge in order to display your skills, basically. The written exams, again, these sometimes follow a computerized test. Sometimes they're set on their own. Good example of that is Emmanuel School. Elaine's has just reverted back to this format as well. And these are the traditional exams that we tend to think of as 11 plus tests. So creative writing, comprehension writing, maths, written maths. They can vary in format sometimes. And so sometimes comprehension might be multiple choice. A good example of that being Latimer Upper. But as a general rule, it's very much those traditional skills of English and maths, sometimes with a reasoning add-on. And then if your child is at a prep school, then they will almost certainly sit what are known as either CAT tests or INCAS tests. They usually sit these every year from year 4 through to year 9. And it's basically the school's way of benchmarking your child within the year group. They're standardized tests, and something that a lot of schools actually withhold from parents is that the year 6 test that they do, so whether it's a CAT or an INCAS, is actually sent with the child's application to the senior school, along with the headmaster or headmistress's report. So these are really important tests before your child does any kind of quote unquote 11 plus exam. This is actually how the school that your child is in is viewing that child, what they're willing to support in terms of school options, etc. So what are the CAT and INCAS tests that they sit every year at school? They're aptitude tests, and as I said, they help both the prep schools themselves, but also the senior schools to understand your child's ability. The great thing about these assessments is that they are really narrow. So I think our average increase on CAT scores, and CAT is the primary, is the one that is used more than INCAS tests. we have, I think it's about a 13-point increase on average in the CAT results that our students get. And if you think that the CAT is out of 141, anything over 130 is considered outstanding. Anything over 125 is considered very good. Anything over 120 is considered good, and so on. So a 13-point swing on that kind of, when the numbers are so close, takes you from potentially being in one category to being in another category of school. And it really does, you know, these standardized assessments do form a really critical part of how the schools view a child. Then you have two key types of assessment that are sat as the primary 11+ exam itself. They tend to come under either a GL assessment, like the ISCB, or under what is known as a chem test. The majority, it actually comes under the GL rubric, and actually a lot of the grammar schools use GL as their exam writer as well. And the GL assessment, it varies a little bit from school to school, but as a general rule, you have an even split across 4 subjects. So English, maths, verbal, and non-verbal. And non-verbal now also includes spatial reasoning. It didn't previously, but it's something that they introduced last year. It's still within that 25%, but it does include spatial reasoning, which is 3D reasoning, so CubeNets, blocks, that kind of thing. And it's used primarily for boys, for the boys' schools. So all of the major London day schools use it. And also pretty much every boarding school will require an ISCB test result as well. The girls' day schools, some of them use the ISCB, some of them use a similar GL style exam that follows the same kind of scope in terms of question type. Something that's worth noting is that the test is adaptive. And so that means that the questions get harder when your child is doing well, and they get easier when your child is struggling. And the way that the result is formulated is that if you can keep going on an upward trajectory in terms of difficulty level of the question, you're rewarded with a much higher score. And if you're tracking down because you're failing to do questions and they're constantly having to deliver easier and easier questions for you to do, then you're tracked down in terms of the result that you get. Something to note about all of the exams on this page is that your child won't write a single word for any of them. They might have to, and I'll come to this in a second, they might have to type a couple of letters in for the chem test, or sometimes if it's still on paper, handwrite it. But it is not, these are not written, there's no written comprehension. There is a comprehension, but it's multiple choice. Everything is multiple choice or short form answer, and everything is done on the computer. Now, the way that I normally summarize the GL test is that it tends to, for me, the GL test is much easier to prepare for than the chem test. Doesn't mean that we can't do chem tests, but it does, usually the chem test requires a longer run up because it's much more focused on language skills and comprehension. And the GL test has a real focus on sequencing, coding, the organization of data, whether that's within an image, within a set of numbers, within English comprehension. Tends to suit children who are more mathematical, but by no means does it mean that if your child isn't, they won't be able to do well on it. It just has that slight bend to it, really. Then you have your chem test, so the alternative assessment. There are huge overlaps, by the way, between these two tests, but as I've already alluded to, there tends to be a stronger emphasis on language, so a broad range of vocabulary, being able to spell correctly, There is also a bigger focus generally on spatial reasoning, although that has become closer since last year. You also have multi-step questions in the Chem test. So that means that your answer to a question relies on your previous answer being right, which is not a characteristic of the GL test. It's simply each question, comes on its own merit. A good something to note here is that this is the first exam that you have to do as part of St. Paul's Girls assessment process. It also is used by City Girls, which has, last 2 years has topped out in terms of results and is very much on the heels of St. Paul's Girls in terms of academic results. And pretty much all Chem tests will have some form of follow-up test after the child has done that test. A quick note, and it's not on here, and I will come to this in a little while, is that the Eton List test, which is the only exam that is actually written by the school itself, even though there are no past papers, we have a big bank of questions that have been that students have told us as they've come out. But it's the Eton List test, so the test that all boys have to sit for entry to Eton, is closest to the Chem test, and so that is a really good source of material to use if your son is going to go on to sit the Eton List test. Okay, so I've actually got a note on it here. Eton List test, as a follow-on test that the boys have to sit after they've done the IACB. And the IACB is a GL test, the one at the top that I had on the previous page. As I said, it's the only school to write its own exam. It's on the computer. It is it's completely unique in terms of the format. A lot of the boys come out describing it as being very similar to a video game. So there are multiple components to it. The components do reappear every year, but Eton proudly tells everyone that no boy has ever actually finished the Eton List test. And I have heard kind of percentages bandied around as the pass marks for Eton, and they're always really, really low. So it's a really tough test. Again, not impossible to prepare for. We have boys who successfully get offered places at Eton every year. But it's something that if you have Eton on your list of schools, you want to communicate that to whoever it is who's preparing your child as soon as possible. Something to note is that for Eton, the boys sit the test according to their birthday. So if you have a summer baby, they will only sit it right at the end of year 6. If you have, September baby, then, they'll be sitting it probably around February time, maybe even earlier if they're doing a combination of other schools. So coming on to written exams, somebody's just put a question in the chat, are these just for schools based in London? Absolutely not. No, there's definitely, I'm speaking about London because that's a kind of, a central place in which to focus. But a lot of what I say here is also relevant to schools outside of London, and we prepare students for those schools. Okay, so onto the written exams. These are usually just in English and maths. But as I mentioned earlier, there are some exceptions. So Highgate, for example, will do English and maths, and then they do a non-verbal reasoning paper as well. And then Elaine's does English and maths, and then they do their own separate reasoning paper. But it's generally, your general breakdown is written maths, some form of English comprehension, whether it's multiple choice or written, and then a composition, which is almost always creative. So story writing, being able to create a story, structure it, use a wide range of vocabulary and a good standard of English. Maths is, again, just tends to vary in terms of the difficulty level, but showing working, these are, the key components that we focus on when we're preparing for a written paper. These do, of course, apply here. Why are these schools listed as exceptions? St. Paul's and Westminster and St. Paul's Girls will all require forms of non-creative composition. So essay writing, one of the essays that the boys had to do for St. Paul's a couple of years ago was everyone should have a wind farm built in their garden in order to produce clean energy. Discuss. Or taxes should be raised in order to pay for the negative effects for climate change. Discuss. Now, the format for that style of writing is very different from, write a story about a scary moment on a walk or up a mountain. And so you want to make sure that those writing skills which actually are quite easy to prepare for, in my opinion, that you have, that you've covered that off before they go into the written assessment. As I said before, the best thing you can do is to focus on core skills in English and maths, in particular spelling, grammar, punctuation. I think maths is, I don't want to say it's easier to correct. It's probably just got its different problems, but language, English language and spelling, and being able to understand vocabulary and context and multiple meaning of words is really difficult to kind of do, like we were talking about in terms of time, right? You're saying, Elaine, starting in year 1 and 2, that kind of foundational work, I see that missing like a big red flag, right? When I have children, and it doesn't mean that we don't, of course, we prepare and we support any child preparing for these exams, but it makes life so much easier if children have those foundational skills. And that applies for any of the exams that I've described today. Okay, so I'm going to keep this brief-ish. And again, you can ask me any questions later on or in a one-on-one. The breakdown of subjects is really English, maths, as I've described, verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning, and then spatial reasoning. And we actually teach these as 5 separate subjects at Paideia, which is, and the reason for that rather is because I find that spatial reasoning is almost always done badly by children, but it's actually very easy to prepare, or relatively easy to get a good, if not excellent, mark on that form of assessment. I'll talk through a couple of the things that you can do in order to support each of the subjects. So I've already spoken about fundamental skills. What does that look like in English? It's daily reading. Reading is not a bonus. It's something that should be completely ingrained in your child's daily set schedule, should be non-negotiable. Spelling, whether that's spelling for school, whether it's something that you're picking up on at home. Grammar, and again, these things, by the way, do not need to be written. Your child does not need to be sitting and writing, reams and reams every day. It can be something that you discuss orally with them at the breakfast table, or, when you're in the car or on the bus or whatever. And the thing about English is that these skills help support your verbal reasoning score. So the better your English is, the easier it is then to prepare for the verbal reasoning exam. And in terms of comprehension, how do you support that? You support it through reading, particularly joint reading. So reading with your child. You can always read something that's perhaps a little bit further ahead than their level. You can read together and ask questions about what is the text about? Who is this? How do they feel? What do you think is going to happen next, etc. And then in composition, you really want to have a mixture of creative and non-creative writing. So, and these, again, it can be something that really doesn't have to be, let's sit down and write 1 page of writing. It can be something that is creative, that that uses image, that your child can maybe deliver some of the story orally and is then written down. This combination of the kind of the demonstration of skills is actually really good for your child's overall progress. So I'd encourage you to think of, whatever suits you and your family, the time that you have. And even if it's, 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, that does compound and it makes a huge difference. In terms of maths, again, I keep speaking about fundamentals, but it is certainly true. Mental arithmetic is, in my opinion, so important. Even if the assessment doesn't have a mental arithmetic component, these exams are so tight on the timing, and the worst thing that can happen is that your child is completely prepared in terms of the content, and then they get timed out, right? Because they just couldn't get there quickly enough. That is heartbreaking, because it's simply a matter of strategy, and strategy should be quite easy to teach, but strategy can only be enforced when your child is able to do some things mentally, in order to be able to then improve their speed, and get complete something on time. Written arithmetic is of course important as well, especially if they're doing a written assessment on which they will be graded on their written work. And something that you can do in everyday life, and this again is just little things every day whenever you see the opportunity, is having your child interact with people in a shop, people in a cafe, giving them the bill, right, for what you've had for lunch or breakfast, whatever it is, asking them to work out what half of it is, what a third of it is. If you're going to give a tip, what should the tip be? If you're paying cash, having them deal with the cash and making sure that the change is correct. Sometimes I do appreciate this is not possible because we're busy and racing around, but that it can even be in the car, estimating the time that it will take you to get to the next destination, or how long you need in order to go from one place to another. These are all things that make a huge difference to how children interpret maths questions on the exam, which tend to be really practical. And it's amazing to me how many children miss these practical basics. And I think it's because as adults, and I find myself doing this sometimes, we're so keen to get things going and keep things moving that we do so many things for our children that they then, it never dawned on them to think about it for themselves. Another thing to note is that you want to drop complex algebra. It will not come up on the exams. What you're looking for is depth and mastery within the curriculum. So anything your child does, like whether it's fractions, decimals, volume, area, you want that to the best possible level they can achieve. Onto the reasonings, and I won't spend too long on these. They are important. You can see that they're an equal component within the exam. But as I said, verbal reasoning often flows from English. Particularly on the GL assessment, I'm going to use it in inverted commas, hack this particular part of the assessment, because we have just processes that the children master and then apply, and it means that we find it very difficult actually to get them to put to step out of line in terms of their work, because once they've mastered a particular process, not for all verbal reasoning, but for a good chunk of the exam, they can just deliver over and over and over again. And this is something that we, of course, when we're preparing children, we want to focus on, because those sections that are easier to prepare for, they help us improve the average, particularly if a child has a weaker area. Somebody is asking, will I share this? Absolutely, I will share this with everyone. I'll send it, I think Elaine already has it, but I'll send it to her. And I'm happy for this to be shared out. So please don't worry about it going. I'm happy for you to have it. Okay, I think this is my final page now. Yeah, it's penultimate page. I'm going to go quickly. Non-verbal reasoning and spatial reasoning, these tend to stem from mathematical skills. So think about VR, verbal reasoning stemming from English. Non-verbal and spatial tend in a broad way to stem from mathematical skills. For me, non-verbal and spatial are the easiest to prepare for. This is puzzles, particularly visual puzzles, a real love of mine. And again, we have processes that we teach. You know, I've seen children from 12 months ago going from 52%. I've just been looking through reports and they're now scoring 86, 87%. And it's just from learning a really organized, structured approach to dealing with this type of material. Scholarships and bursaries, I don't want to gloss over these because they are important, but I know that Elaine has a massive amount of information and knowledge on this, definitely more than I do. Key differences, scholarships tend not to have a financial element to them, or they might have a very small financial benefit. Bursary is your means tested fee assistance. It can be all of the fees, it can be just some of the fees. We have bursary students who apply year in, year out, and we support them academically because they have to cross the line academically, even if you are applying for a bursary. But again, in conference with Elaine, we can support that. It's very much on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the school is. Scholarship exams, this is something that's a bit of a speciality of mine. Every year I prepare a boy either for the King's Scholarship at Eton, or it's now the King's Scholarship at Westminster. And I think I've had 7 scholarships at Westminster, which is the hardest scholarship in the whole country to get. And I think I've got 3 from at Eton now. I end up with more Westminster boys. I don't know why. Final thing, if your child has special educational needs, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, they will not necessarily be given extra time. Some of the smartest children I know are dyslexic, and if they were given extra time, it would be it would be so unfair for the other children sitting the exam because they have extremely high IQs. But there are, depending on what the educational psychologist report states, there are different things that schools can and will do to support your child so that they can sit the exam in a way that supports them and allows them to demonstrate their skills. Again, this is very much on a case-by-case basis, but we support students with a range of special educational needs, including ADHD, as I said, dyslexia, and I, am in conference with parents about supporting that, on a continuous basis. So, I'm going to stop talking for a second, let you go, and I know there are a few questions. I'll take this down.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. I think I'm not the only one. In fact, probably everyone on this call has found what you've just shared as completely phenomenal and great. It's been really, really good. Thank you so much for the information. So parents, please do ask your questions in the chat and I'll be reading them out in the short space of time that we have left. So I'll start with Elizabeth, because I believe you've already answered Temi's question around whether the schools are just based in London. So the answer was no. So Elizabeth is asking, she would appreciate your view on Oundle School requirements.
Yeah, so Oundle School is a written exam. I'd have to check if they have a reasoning component actually, because off the top of my head, I can't remember. but they have their own written exam, tends to be quite traditional. You will also then go on and have an interview, which will be academic, and what the scope of the exams will be it will vary depending on how old your child is when they enter. So if they're coming from the prep school through to senior, then there's a different form of assessment than if they're coming as an external student joining at 13. So it depends a little bit on the point of entry, but they tend to have traditional English, maths, and it has TBC on the reasoning. I'd have to check that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. Next question is from Nana. She's asking where your teaching center location is.
So we are completely online, and I always say to parents, kind of, if you can just put out the horror of COVID school from your head, and we offer a free trial session for everyone before committing to anything. And I meet every single child one-on-one before they join to try the program. It really inverts everything that we've learned about learning online. Children were learning with us. They were, on holiday at the beach, and parents were writing to us saying, I don't know what it is, but I told him he didn't have to log on today, but he insisted on coming on. And so it is online, but give us the benefit of the doubt on this one and just give it a try if you think it's something that could work for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Isabel. Next question is from Angela. It sounds like science is not really important in the scheme of things.
No, it's not. If you're doing, so by the time you're doing 13 plus entry, then you probably will be assessed on science. So common entrance is assessed on science, for example. And if you're doing a separate, like what's known as a late 13 plus entry, then you'll probably do a science assessment. But as a general rule for straight 11 plus, there is no science.
Awesome. Thank you, Isabel. And Rayanne, forgive me if I mispronounced your name. She's asking, Wellington Grammar School use SET, so selective eligibility test. Is this one of the ones you mentioned?
Do you know what? I would have to check. In fact, I'm going to check it now. Or you can book a call with me or just email me. I'm not 100% sure. The thing with the schools is they often give them these like names, whereas they all come from the same, 99% of the time they come from the same two providers. And what the providers are doing is they're chopping up bits of the exam and creating an exam for the school. But it all comes from the same pool in terms of the style and the scope of the questions and the curriculum. So I won't look it up now because otherwise I'll go down a rabbit hole. But if you write me an email or book a call, we can go through it.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you, Isabel. Elizabeth is asking, is year 6 too late?
No, but you're gonna have to do a lot of work between now and the exams, and it will depend on the school. So a good example is, we have a girl in year 6 right now. She's preparing for Sevenoaks, and Sevenoaks doesn't actually assess until year 7. So she's fine, right? Like she has a year, and that's all fine. It will depend on the schools. But it's never too late for us, but there's obviously ideal time.
I think Elizabeth is trying for Allendale School. So
okay, so at 13, okay, then no.
Great. Jennifer's asking, how long is your program? How far in advance do they need to start? They, I presume, the children or the child.
Yeah, so we tend to recommend children joining us between 18 and 24 months before the exam, the first exam that they're going to sit. We do take children with all types of timescale. What I would say is that, so in terms of our program, we work on what's known as a spiral curriculum. And so this is actually centered around the Singaporean method in maths, which is a kind of Asian style of teaching maths. And what happens is we have a fundamental teaching principle that we have for each lesson, and children are spiraled out in terms of the level of difficulty, depending on how well or not so well they're doing on the material that is centered around, let's say, fractions. that's the central teaching principle. And we are able to push easier material to certain children if they're struggling, and we're also able to push harder material if they've mastered what we've already given them. And so it means that even though it's in a group, it's on a group basis, children actually get the full range that they need according to that, how it is they're responding to that teaching principle in that moment.
Awesome, thank you.
Sorry to answer, you can join anytime.
Perfect, thank you so much. I will group Karen and Alicia's question together as they're slightly similar. Karen is asking, do you prepare for the 11 plus? And Alicia's asking, do you take students in year 2?
So yeah,
Karen said, do you prepare for 13 plus?
Yeah, so we do prepare for 13 plus. It will depend a little bit on, again, this is really the school's fault for not being clear enough. It would depend on the age of your child. So we don't do science, for example. We don't do French. We don't do Latin and Greek. We have children preparing for the 13 plus, but they've usually come through the 11 plus route, and then they're going on to do that, as I described, these secondary 13 plus exams. Or what sometimes happens is they use us for English and maths, and if there's a reasoning component and reasoning, and I can give advice on preparing for science and languages, etc. So we do, it'll depend a little bit again on situation and school, etc.
Awesome, thank you. A question from Cindy, but I believe Elaine has already answered, but I'll share it anyway. She just mentioned City of London School for Girls said not to get your child tutored for 11 plus, as they can tell and they will prefer the child not to be. Is this correct? Elaine's kindly responded and said everyone tutors their child. Please do not be fooled. Any further comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, Elaine is right, and it's we're certainly on one side of the coin. I have teachers who work for me, who work within the company, and they very much have seen the other side. And they help build the curriculum with me. I think that it's that very English problem of people don't like to talk about it. And the schools, of course, the schools would love that none of the children were tutored, but they all are. And if parents are saying they're not, honestly, 9 times out of 10, they're lying to you. I'm sorry, but it's just, I've seen it so many times. I've worked for families, and I know that they're extremely close friends, and I know that they do not know that I'm working for each of the families. And so the schools will say that. They also say you can't change your CAT results or your exam results. We have a lot of data to prove otherwise. I think for me, I'm a believer in balance, right? Doing things, and what we teach are real skills that go beyond these exams, that make these children flexible thinkers. And we work with a lot of schools as well, right? We have collaborations with schools, and so yeah, Elaine's right. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I did want to add to that and say that a school will tell you never to tutor. I made that mistake when my son was 5, and I thought everybody was coming in. No, parents will lie to you and say their child is just naturally gifted. If you can pick up that line as well, which is what I did with my children in terms of music, they're just naturally amazing. No, they were having 3 hours of piano lessons every week. But because you're going into a competitive environment, your child has to win a place, and that thing about you can't change your CAT results, I know that that's not true, because we've worked with people who've come with maybe 100 and have shown them how to answer the questions. They've got 125. And so I totally agree with you on that, Isabel. And so I'm really sorry, Cindy, but just don't believe them. Just nod, smile and wave, as they say on Madagascar. But yeah, don't believe them.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Isabel. Next question is, when you say completely online, do you mean you don't use any of the common 11 plus books?
So we write 100% of our content. It's completely, I mean, I'm currently on late 2024 in terms of our organization and the delivery of our curriculum. We have, I don't know how many, we're probably into millions of questions now. And why do we do it that way? There are some 11 plus books that I like very much. And sometimes I actually, we reassess children every half term. So parents have a clear metric in terms of where their child is up to, where they're up to 7 or 8 weeks later, what they've put in, what they've got out of it. And if it's not working, it's there, and it's there in black and white in front of you. And occasionally I might say, this book is great, go away and do this, 5-10 minutes a day. The thing that we have with our content is that it's categorized in the finest detail. So I know exactly which question type can come up on which exam, what level it is, the results that a child has, the scope of questions that they should be seeing in front of them in order to support their learning in the best way possible. We write all of our own content, but it's all of our results are standardized as well. That's the other thing, which it makes a huge difference in predicting a child's outcome on the exam.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Isabel. Another question is, Barbara's child is writing 7+ exams in November. What would your advice be on what to do, as Oxford schools are so competitive?
Yeah, Oxford schools are some of the worst, actually. Not worst, but in terms of the level, right, of getting in. And I think it's because it's just full of academics and they have these really cerebral conversations with their children, and it comes down to, unfortunately, and I know oftentimes we don't want to do this because we're tired, or it's just, we just want to have a kind of a mindless few hours. That daily work in maths and English, particularly for 7+, every day or nearly every day will compound and make a huge difference. The other thing, I think for me, 2 things for 7+ that I see that are a really big problem: handwriting. It's so easy to fix. Get some handwriting sheets and practice so that the handwriting is legible. Second thing is speaking with strangers, because they will be interviewed. Even if it's just your child ordering the coffee at the coffee shop, get them used to, because these are young children, right? And sometimes they're just nervous or shy. Get them in front of people they don't know, obviously in an environment that's going to be comfortable and positive for them. These are easy things you can do to help them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. Next question is, what is the size range of your live group lessons with your company? Thank you.
So in terms of, I'm assuming that's in terms of the number of children on the call in the group. So we have up to 30 students in the class. Something to bear in mind is that none of the children can see one another, and this is entirely intentional. And so instead of that online COVID school where, one child was picking their nose and the other one's, flicking the camera on and off, which we all experienced to some extent, the child is entirely focused on the teacher, which is a lot of the time me. And it also means that the content that they see on their screen is not the same as the content that another child is seeing. It's always around that core principle. But I spoke about the spiral. Some children are spiraled all the way up to advanced material, and some of them work at their own pace on more fundamental material. And this is because we have software that is basically processing the work that the child is doing instantly. So I can see exactly who is at the top of the group, who's middle, who's at the bottom, what the average is, if it's an anomaly, etc. So it's really a technical support that allows us to deliver this in a really individualized way.
Sure, awesome. Thank you so much for that. And kind of similar to the same topic, Nan is asking, is it one-to-one, online or group, and how much does it cost?
Mhm. So it's all in a group, as I described. So in this this way that is really different from what you would have experienced before. In terms of the cost, we have 3 price brackets. For 1 live class per week, it's £65 a month. And so that's, you know, averages about 4.5 classes a month. For 3 live classes per week, it's £105 a month. And for 5 live classes per week, it's £135, which works out at about £4 or £5 a class. So it's actually, that includes all of the reports that we do every half term. And so for a subscription cost, it's high, but the amount of, you know, for the last 3 days, I've probably written 20,000 words in terms of reporting around our children. If a child has done badly on assessment, I'm on the phone, right? You know, what's going on? Is this an anomaly? Did she have a bad day? If not, then we go into solution mode and we come up with a solution for for this child's particular context. So it's group and that's pricing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Isabel. Lola's asked a question, but I believe it's already been answered. I'll just say it for ease of reference. Do you tutor children in year 8 for common entrance exams? And I believe the answer is yes. A comment by Angela saying balance is really important. There's life after exams. Any thoughts on that, Isabel or Elaine, before moving on to the next questions?
I do. I just say very quickly, we have, honestly, there's a whole other side to what we do. Every Friday, we celebrate Friday wins. The children, through me, share things that happened to them that week that are not to do with exams or school. We had prizes over the summer that the children could win for doing things that were academic and non-academic. I'm a huge believer in that. For me, balance is literally balance, in that I think it's equally unfair to expect a child to work hours and hours a day in preparation for an exam. But I think it's also equally unfair to put them in for an exam that they are very likely to fail because they were not prepared. That is, those two to me are the same. And we never prescribe masses of hours. We are really smart learning, strategic learning, regular check, not just coming in for 2 weeks before the exam and wanting to do, 4 or 5 hours a day after school. It's not going to work. And knowing that these skills will be applicable to, their schooling way down the line, not just for these exams.
Awesome. Thank you, Isabel. A question from Elizabeth. What about access to online tools like Atom, Bond Online? Do you use any other branded tools, or is it all proprietary?
So we're completely proprietary. We don't use any of those tools. Some of our students do. I have to say they're kind of varying utility, and that's not to say that they're not useful. They are useful. The difference with us is that we operate on a teach first, test second basis. So even in all my years as a private tutor, I was completely against, and this is proven with research project after research project, that you have to teach principle before testing a child on their ability and their understanding of that principle. This mindless tapping away at a screen and thinking that your child is going to improve will not work for the most part.
Sure.
Can I just say something? And both myself and Isabel agree, because we knew Atom in its infancy, and Atom has changed a lot. But the difference between myself and Isabel is we're all about educational outcomes and giving children life skills. And I think that Atom is a good tool. It's all about the numbers, but it doesn't necessarily see where the holes are for your child and build on those strengths. It literally is where your child is not doing well. And I'm calling out Atom because it was the one that she mentioned. Bond Online, depending on the school that you're going for, like I wouldn't suggest doing Bond Online if you're going for Westminster. Like that doesn't make sense. But I think that what's different about myself and Isabel is we are very, very keen on educational outcomes and life skills and skills that they can take on for their GCSEs, their A levels, even if they want to go to university, if they want to set up a business. These are skills that they will have for life. So yeah, but I think that those models and those products just prepare them for an exam which can make or break them.
Thank you, Elaine. Next question is from Jennifer. How much time each day should be spent on each subject, bearing in mind they, i.e. the child, may also be practicing music, art, sports, or other extracurricular activities?
It's really difficult to say. Really depends on how old your child is, you know, the school that they're going for, how far in advance you're preparing. Having said that, just in no way and any circumstance would I ever be suggesting, you know, several hours after school. Might be that midweek, and that's why we do classes at the beginning of the week and at the end and on Sundays. That midweek when they've got a ton of homework, they're usually pretty tired. You know, it might be that they just do their reading that day, right? And then on a Sunday morning when they've got a quiet period, or Saturday, whenever it is, that's when they sit down and they do a couple of hours of really focused work with a break, etc. So sorry to, I hate answers like this, but it really does depend. I'm sorry.
No, thank you for your honesty, Isabel. Chinere asks, is there additional work that children should do with the online lessons?
Yeah, so we have our own platform, actually, similar to some of the platforms we've described, where we have practice assessments, etc. And the difference being that it's not just practice. There's a learning component to everything that the child does in any experience that they have of us. And they are able to do that between classes, and we can push through additional material on there if that's what parents want. Some parents are happy with just the live classes, but that is available to you as a supplement, as a complement really to the work that we do in class.
Awesome, thank you, Isabel. The next question, I think you slightly touched on it, but I'll ask anyway. It's from Faye. They're asking, is it a set day the classes take place, or can the parents choose the day for the classes, like on a weekend or evenings? But I know you've literally just mentioned being the start of the week, end of the week, and on Sundays. But yeah, please do feel free to expand on that.
Yeah, they are set days. As we're growing, we'll have kind of wider time options, but I do always joke that I have a PhD in children's timetables. And so I think that we have the kind of most commonly available time slots for most children. We are on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, 6 till 7. And then we are on Sunday afternoons, 3 till 4. We take a half-hour break, and then we do 4:30 to 5:30. So it leaves Saturday free, football, family day, whatever it is that you want to do. But we'll have more in the near future, more time slots available as well.
Thank you. Next question is from Tolu. What's the success rate of getting children into their desired school from a percentage perspective?
Yeah, so we had one girl who didn't get any of her top 3 schools last year, and I won't go into detail, but it was mostly down to a familial situation. They had a family crisis, and so it was 100%. It's probably around 99 point something percent of our students get at least one of their top 3 choice schools, and over 95% get all 3. So that's our kind of percentage flag.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you so much, Isabel. Rachel is asking, apologies if this question has already been asked, but how long are your sessions?
So they're 1 hour, and we do, I mean, at least 50 minutes. I'm a kind of a real, like, if we go at pace, it's very thorough. We do at least 50, probably 55 minutes of really kind of ultra focused learning.
Awesome, thank you. And Bookie, just following on from that, Bookie's asking, what age can they start your online classes?
So generally at around 7 years old. We have a few children who are younger than that, but they tend to be quite far ahead. They're really kind of reaching ahead already at school. Around 7 or 8 years old, but we assess all children on entry. So, and I meet every child. Sometimes I say to parents, come back next year, here are some resources, here are some recommendations. to keep you going till then, and then we start the following year. So it really, our success depends on the child's success. So it's not, there's no value in us having a child that's struggling and it's not a good fit for them.
Sure. And what age do you recommend parents start preparing for 7+ exams? This is from Daniela.
Yeah, so the 7+ exams, and those are our exceptions. So we have 7+ students for the ultra academic 7+ entry points. So thinking about St. Paul's Juniors, Westminster Under School. And again, I don't want to give you one of those non-answers. The 7+ is so dependent around social maturity. So I have, afterwards I've come across boys who I know absolutely bombed the 7 and 8+. One of them being, a boy who went on to get a King's Scholarship and, ranked top of his year. And he was at both 7 and 8, he couldn't get into any of the schools that he was then offered at 11. And he was very babyish, right, as a child, apparently, because I didn't know the family then. And I've seen that myself firsthand. And so what you're looking for is that the ability to sit down, not for an hour, but maybe 20, 30 minutes. Obviously, they need to be able to write as well and read. So those core skills matter more than anything for that age group. And that's why I was talking as well about being able to speak to adults, right, who aren't your parents or your close family members. So that work, if you really want to do the 7+, it starts with, it starts probably before they write, and then you do need to do quite a lot of acceleration through to the 7+, probably from the age of 5, really.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. Rachel's asking, how many children do you have on your books? And after this question, we have 2 more, and then we can wrap it up. Thank you.
How many children do we have on our books? It's a kind of closely guarded secret. I say it because I've had kind of parents who are clearly from our competitors calling me up. Hello, I have a child called, Jezebella the Third. And I'm going to plead the 5th on that one, if that's okay. I'm not suggesting that's why you're asking, but we actually closed our subscriptions for 8 weeks this summer because we only deliver our program when we can deliver it at 100%. If we are approaching the point where we are going to drop, we close and we go to a waiting list. And in fact, we only opened again last week. That's why Elaine was writing to me. I was like, not yet. Can we do it in a little while?
Awesome. Again, thank you for your honesty, Isabel. Just a few more questions. Next one is, how do you advise as parents we can assess how well our child's preparation is going, especially those already in year 5?
Well, we have a baseline assessment. So every child who comes through our system has a baseline assessment. They can come and do the baseline assessment, which is across all subjects. It's standardized, and that will give you, and I can then give you a really clear idea of where they're up to relative to their age group. But if it's not us, some form of assessment that you can rely on. That's the tricky thing. There are a lot of assessments out there. I'm a big fan of the CGP. If it's not us, CGP assessments, or the GL assessments, if that's the assessment your child is going to sit. I know they have some mock tests.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. We've got 2 more questions. The next question is, what determines the number of lessons per week the child takes? Is it the parent's choice, the child's level, neither, or an amalgamation, or whether yourself and your team have any input on this as well?
Yeah, so actually it's everyone comes through me, or sometimes head of education. I think it's because I have this kind of encyclopedic knowledge of the schools that I tend to do these calls. I will take a look at the target schools that you're applying to. I'll reconcile the test type like I described right in my talk. I'll reconcile the level, the topics that they're going to be assessed in. I will also look at how old your child is. The character profile you've given me, you know, there's a little girl in our program who is just an absolute, I mean, she's just a complete whiz, right? Genius level. And her mum is like coming to me saying she's always wanting to do more work, right? And something she thrives on. So she does 5 hours a week. She adores it, right? It's part of her routine. And and that's, you know, but for other children, you know, we have children with ADHD, and for them, you know, just getting 1 or 2 high quality sessions each week is a huge benefit, right, to them at being positive and contributing forwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. We've got our last question, but certainly not the least. Do you feel summer-born children struggle more than winter-borns at 11 plus?
So there's a lot of, I know that a lot of prep, some of the prep schools are really quite, I think, unfair on this. There are some prep schools that will not admit summer-born children. It's not an official policy, but the children, it stops at April, and then that's it. It's not the case for the senior schools. I think I know that in terms of scientific research, this has been proven, so it must be true to some extent. There are, as I said, Eton assesses according to birthday, so there are some schools that are doing things to try and counteract this. But I don't know. I think if you have particularly, you know, July, August baby, and if you've seen them be quite late in terms of their development, it's just a matter of maybe bringing forward the time that you start, so they get a bit more of a slower introduction to this kind of preparation. And that, for me, almost always levels it out in my experience. It's not something I really noticed, to be honest.
Can I just say something as being a mother of a child who's born on the 27th of August? When we were, I know, it just came in right at the last minute, right? He was due in September and he decided to come in August. But when we were applying for Eton said to us, you don't have to take it in year 6. You can take the exam in year 7, which is the option. And we didn't even realize that option was even there. And so some schools do take that into account, that you've got a late baby. And I think you just have to go to the schools that will work with you. I am not a believer in going to a school adamantly that doesn't really want you anyway. They'll just find ways of you just not coming in. Go to a school that really wants you, and then your child will thrive.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do have this conversation a lot. You really have to look at the character of the child. You know, we have children who are a little bit like me, and I hate to say this, I was always the kind of slightly lazy, slightly you know, always thought they were the smartest and the cleverest in school. And for me, the best thing to happen was being surrounded by a bunch of children who are as clever as me, if not cleverer than me. And I needed that to drive me. I needed that really high pressure environment, because otherwise just, you know, I would have completely relaxed, because I always found school very easy. And a, you know, robust character, happy to be kind of, you know, bandied about a bit. But you have other children where they're really clever, but they might be very sensitive. They might have other, you know, other problems, health issues. And then it's really, you're looking, actually, those children are often best in a less academic school at the top of their game, right? Being that top student or the top 5 student, because when we speak about, you know, ultra academic, we're splitting hairs, right? These schools there are so many brilliant schools who do deliver these amazing academic programs, and, you know, all of the other things as well. And so then I think it does come down to character, right? And like you say, what's the feeling that you get? You know, if you're going there and the registrar is being rude and they're not supporting you, answering your questions, like, there's your answer, right? That's some, you're paying them, and it is their job to support you as an applicant, right? Even before you become a student. If they're not willing to do it when they're about to get, you know, a really nice amount of money out of you, then they're probably not going to do it when your child is there either. So that's a good rule of thumb, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you, Elaine. And thank you, amazing parents, for joining what I believe has been an extremely informative, insightful, and dare I say it, inspiring call. I hope it's really encouraged everyone to not feel dissuaded, but really start getting a move on, hopefully. and and Isabel, how can the parents
Yeah.
contact you?
I'm going to put my, I've got a QR code. It goes straight to my calendar.
Oh, awesome. Very tech
So,
savvy. We love that.
yeah, just, and Elaine's subscribers, Elaine's group network rather, get 15% off the subscription, which I can give to you. You can either use the code or I can give it to you after we've had a call. But the call is completely complimentary. There are no expectations. Sometimes I turn around to parents and say, this is not what you need. Go and do X, Y, and Z. Go and speak to A, B, and C. I'm here, whether you are a Paideia student or not. I'm always open and here to answer questions, because something that will take me or Elaine like 30 seconds to answer, I know can take parents months, if not longer, to find the answer to. And I do believe that a power in this system is, I mean, it's knowledge, right? And clarity of knowledge. And that's what I really believe in, that for every single parent. So, because that's where you start to get equity, right? In terms of applicants being recognized for their skills and for, you know, for what they can give to these schools, because that's what these students are doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you again. Elaine, thank you, parents. Hopefully you can see the QR code and you'll be utilizing the free consultation that Isabel has kindly recommended to everyone. And we hope that this is not the last time we see you on a Zoom, Isabel.
No, of course.
No pressure.
I'll be here anytime. Thank you to the both of you for organizing this. I mean, I did the easy bit. I just turned up and talked about what I know. So really, this is you and the both of you and your team, you know, putting this together and this amazing community. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And without a doubt, and with all protocols adhered to, we are now saying a lovely good night to everyone. Thank you for your extra time. We did go over slightly, but again, it was such a great session. We hope to see you again. Thank you, parents, and good night.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.